Okay, guys, I'm going to be doing an in-depth review slash breakdown and my thoughts of the Star Wars The Phantom Menace. I'm going to be trying to do this with every Star Wars film. I've already reviewed every Star Wars film, but I kind of wanted to go kind of like scene by scene, moment by moment type thing, where I give you my overall thoughts about everything it's said. Because like my reviews really give a general opinion about the film, but now I'm talking about my thoughts on this character, my thoughts on the scene. So let's just get right into it with the Phantom Menace. Start with all the Star Wars films. So yeah, the opening was interesting. It starts out with, I mean, I don't even know who they were. They were like Republic troopers going to the Trade Federation interesting kind of ship where it was like the semicircle and then like the circle in the middle. I always thought that type of ship was fascinating. So yeah, that was exciting to see. And I think like the opening on the Trade Federation ship itself was fine. I honestly thought it was pretty good. I think like especially diving into this new kind of area of Star Wars and getting introduced to Obi-Wan Kenobi as a Padawan and Qui-Gon Jinn, who I think are honestly two of the very few good characters that came out of the prequels. I think they're definitely up there. I think Qui-Gon, even though he was in only one film, I still think made a big positive impression. And so again, like that opening sequence when they're fighting the different battle droids and investigating the ship and they meet that white protocol droid, I think all that was solid and exciting. And I think action packed. And I love again like introducing the Jedi in their prime was exciting. And starting out with the fan favorite as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And right from the beginning, you're grasping on to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And so that was exciting. And as far as Newt Gunray and the other, Trade Federation members, yeah. Like, I think like it was funny where it's like the mouth didn't move. But another cool part of the scene was our introduction to Darth Sidious. And I think it was interesting because it was funny because like I feel like some people said like who have watched it at the time of its release, which I didn't, but I saw it in a re-release. But those people said that they didn't realize that Darth Sidious and the Emperor were the same person. Like I think that's obviously some people understood that, but some people didn't. So it's one of those things where it's like not hidden that Darth Sidious and the Emperor were two different people, but I just thought it was fascinating that not everybody realized it, even though they've seen Return of the Jedi and this film. And then immediately you're get introduced to Darth Maul, and that was exciting. Honestly, that scene was exciting because you see Sidious in the hologram, and then all of a sudden you see Maul come in the same hologram, and you're like, what? But I thought it was also interesting interesting in a kind of bad way. When you look close at Newt Gunray, you're like, his lips don't even move at all, or at least aren't in sync with what he's saying. Like they're like, and say like suppose he says yes, and you say yes, like not at the same time. So I thought that was interesting. But like as soon as they got into Naboo, it does slow to a halt when Jar Jar comes in. And I definitely do not like this character. I think he is very annoying, but it's not like he ruins Star Wars for me in any way. And honestly, I don't have a big problem with Gungans. I have a problem with Jar Jar Binks. Because, like, Jar Jar seems to be the autistic, Gungan. Not, it's not, like, all Gungan. Like, when you just see the Gungans in battle, they're actually pretty good in battle. But you see, the point being that Jar Jar is definitely the pink sheep of the Gungans in a clumsy way. And, in some ways Jar Jar does take me out of the film. But, like, for example, like, that whole underwater sequence with the fish and stuff, which I thought was exciting to see, kind of like, starring, exploring the underwater world of Star Wars with seeing the Gungans, but also particularly that cool scene with the fish, and then you think like you're being chased by a big fish, and then a fish eats that, and then a big fish eats that. Like that whole stuff was not bad either. That was good, solid as well, and so that was all fine. Then the next thing I wanted to touch upon. Again, like when Jar Jar speaks in that scene, it wasn't the best, but it didn't take me out of the film. And as far as them going to the Gungan world, it was fine. I think like I didn't care for why they went, because they went to get to ask permission if Jar Jar went or is allowed to tour them in the upper world of Naboo, which is obviously being occupied by the Trade Federation and by the Separatists. And so again, like that, I think like it's one of the things where I honestly thought like the location of where the Gungan Palace, so it's kind of like underwater palace and like kind of like the Atlantis of the Star Wars world, was honestly pretty cool. Like the location was cool, but again, the reason why they had to go there to ask permission to let Jar Jar show them around, because I didn't really like Jar Jar Binks at all, I wasn't invested in that scene. But ultimately they do, let Jar Jar in. And so when they go to Naboo, again, like cool. Like the action in this film is really good. A lot of CGI and all that, but still, I still think it was really cool to see. I think like, again, all the stuff with Jar Jar doesn't necessarily take me out of the film like I think Anakin's scenes do, but they are like one of those things where it's like maybe like if I'm watching on Disney Plus, I'd use like the skip 10 seconds thing, because it is one of those things where it's like I'm not the biggest fan. The biggest fan. I'm not a fan of Jar Jar Binks at all. I think he's dumb and stupid and clumsy in his own words. So anyways, they go. And then they rescue the pilots, which again was all exciting. I think it was exciting to see kind of like, I guess like, it made it seem like these were like the rebels, the rebellion of this film and this universe. Which, Naboo didn't have a big part in the other films, especially like all these guards and stuff. But it was still exciting to see kind of like those guards and stuff. It was good. It was fine. So anyways, you got all that with the guards and stuff, and obviously they make their escape onto the ship with the princess, sort of, kind of, maybe. The whole stuff with like Padme, who's the real queen, hiding herself as a queen. All that was kind of like, I don't think like it was it didn't grip me and intrigue. It wasn't that it was confusing. I just think it was like somewhat confusing. It's somewhat confusing, especially because her stand-in is so similar that it's not like it didn't take me out of the film. Like again, like some of the other stuff in this film, but it was something where it's one of those things where like a lot of things in this film I didn't mind. But I didn't mind it in a negative way. As in, like, I didn't mind it, aka I didn't care for it, Because, like, sometimes some things are, like, you don't mind it, meaning it's good. It's, like, a good version of saying you don't mind something. But, like, seeing kind of Padme kind of being the queen's bodyguard, I didn't care. Or I didn't even know. Was she the bodyguard? I can't remember. But anyways, they got on the ship. And then they go, and then there's like this whole thing with the droids, and this is the first chronologically appearance of R2, and that was exciting. I love R2. I think R2 does not speak a lot, but I still think he's super sick, and I think I like the concept and execution of how they were able to get you to understand how important, or not how important, but how R2 became important, because you start to understand, like, you start to realize he's had all these adventures with all these Jedis and stuff, and how did R2 become high in the ranks and end up becoming Anakin's, Astra droid. So you kind of see in the scene where all these other droids get killed, you kind of see R2, save the ship. And that was an exciting scene because you're like, wow, R2 is really that good. And I think it's one of the best R2 moments. I mean, it's not to say like he has a lot of standout moments, but that is a big one. Like, I think like I've loved R2 in all these films, but I think like this scene was like his big moment to prove himself. So that was exciting. And then once I get to Tatooine, the film takes a big lump in everything. And like the plot basically stops. When they get to Tatooine, the plot stops. It does. There's no other way to put it. Because you're in like this riveting scene where they're being chased by like the Trade Federation and they have to, save Padme, and like they crash on Naboo. Or not Naboo, Tatooine. It's like, I think why going to Tatooine would ever work is the nostalgia factor of like, oh, we're visiting Naboo, or Tatooine. I keep saying Naboo. Oh, we're visiting Tatooine, but that'll end once you've seen Tatooine so many times. Now you're just like, oh, it's just Tatooine. Yeah, and I guess it was fine. So yeah, they go to the town and they meet Watto, which Watto's, definitely looks weird, sounds weird, is weird, all of the above, let's just say that. And then you meet Anakin Skywalker. And I do not like Kid Anakin Skywalker at all. I think like the concept of seeing like the greatest villain of all time as a 9-year-old is awkward in and of itself. It just is. Like, I feel like this film's sole purpose is to introduce Anakin and get him how like the Jedi and Obi-Wan met Anakin. And it's like Obi-Wan's not even really in this film. Let's be honest here. Obi-Wan's not really in this film at all. At all. It's really, in many ways, Qui-Gon's film. Because Obi-Wan in this film is very much sidelined for the majority of it. And, like, are you about to say it's a 9-year-old's film, The Phantom Menace? And it's like, that is also eking, because, like, apparently, Obi-Wan's staying in the ship to help fix it. No, he's not. He's just staying in the ship. He just stays in the ship the whole time. It's ridiculous. It's like Obi-Wan Kenobi, one of the best characters of Star Wars, is literally getting like benched in many ways. Like literally like sit there at Obi-Wan. And it's like I didn't like that in and of itself, but I think having again Anakin as a 9-year-old was at best. Meh at best. It really was not. Especially when you see like Padme must be like 20. Well, maybe not 20, but maybe 15, 18. I don't know. At least double. Like she's double Anakin's age. Like think. Like I didn't get that. And I think that makes it even more worse when you get to Attack of the Clones and like Anakin's had like not only like a growth spurt, looks totally different, and Padme looks exactly the same. That's why I just think like stick with Hayden Christensen the whole way through, because it makes no sense to have a 9-year-old go from like a 23-year-old or whatever and have Padme look exactly the same. It's not Padme's fault. It's not having because it's like if you're gonna have the same actress for Padme but not Anakin, that's dumb. Because magically, what's supposed to be like a 9-year gap suddenly makes it seem like Anakin's now older than Padme. So it's all dumb and shit. It just is. Like that's why I think like I've always been under the impression that this film does not need to exist. I always thought it should be Attack of the Clones, a film that took place in the Clone Wars, and Revenge of the Sith. Because it's like, ultimately, who cares how Anakin met Obi-Wan? I mean, like, I guess maybe people do care, but like, when you have like that or this film, because like, I guess like, it's the problem is you can't build a film around a character, and that was their problem. Was I think with this film they tried to build a film around Anakin Skywalker. How can they make Anakin Skywalker meet Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn? Or just, yeah. So let's create this whole elaborate plot. So 2 things had to happen. Obi-Wan had to meet Anakin, and Padme had to meet Anakin. So they're going to build a whole story around that. And that does set you up for disaster. It should always be the character fits the story. But that's not what happened in this film. And I don't think it happened particularly good at all. So yeah, I didn't like Anakin Skywalker as a kid at all. And as for Shmi Skywalker, I mean, like, it's Shmi. It's Shmi. Who cares? I'm not in the sense that I didn't like Shmi, but she served her purpose. Because, like, ultimately, when you look at each character, you kind of want to look at what's their purpose in this film. And you realize, oh, Shmi's purpose is just to be Anakin's mom. That's fine. She did a good job with that. That's that. Now we're on to another thing. And so, yeah. And I thought it was also exciting. One of the few things exciting about Shmi and Anakin in this film was that it was also interesting to get your first real perspective of the Jedi from, like, an outsider. You know, someone looking in. You know, an outsider looking in. In the sense that they're not a Jedi. They know about the Jedi. And, like, the Jedi are not friends with them. In the sense, like, let's look at every scenario of the original trilogy. Luke ends up training to be a Jedi. And prior to being a Jedi, he had never heard about the Jedi. Okay, Han doesn't care at all about the Jedi. He's heard about the Jedi, but doesn't believe in the Jedi, so why would he look up for the Jedi? He doesn't care, you know? And then Leia, you know, for her, it's like, oh, my dad's best friend is a Jedi. You know, you don't, to Leia, she's not looking at it as a Jedi. She's looking at it, oh, my dad's pal. You know, in the sense that that's literally Bail Organa's pal. And so, you never really got that sense. So here's, like, the first time of, like, Anakin Skywalker, the 9-year-old who looks up to the Jedi. And so, like, that's also your first real sense of, like, the Jedi really, you know, you start to really realize the popularity, but also kind of the hero that is a Jedi. How people look up to the Jedi. And I think you never really got that in the original trilogy, so that was a nice touch there. But again, like, not an important touch, at the least. So yeah, let's move on forward. So let's see. So then the pod racing scene. Oh yeah, we forgot. The pod racing scene. I liked it. I just think it went on a tad bit too long. Again, I think having Anakin as a kid, especially in the pod racing scene, it was the most eminent. But it took me out of the film. It did, and especially the scene, because the scene, like if I'm trying to think. Like, if it was, like, teen Anakin, that would have been a lot better. But when you have a 9-year-old Anakin pod racing against these, like, 40-year-old people, you're like, I don't know, I don't care. You know, it's, like, goofy and shit. I like the idea of pod racing, and I think I like the scene. And I have no problem with Anakin winning. I mean, he's the chosen one. It's not an excuse or anything. He's just the chosen one. He probably won because he used the Force and because the Force binds him and whatever. And so he won in that regards. So I have no problem with that. I'm just saying, having just the general aspect of having Obi-Wan as a teen, that I was not for. I'm going to be moving over my location with people, as there's gardeners and stuff over there. So anyway, so let's continue. So, again, like the pod racing scene, real good scene, and kind of like that first kind of, and you got one of the only kind of riveting scenes of their experience at Tatooine, because like I said earlier, when they go to Tatooine, the film very much slows to a halt. 100%. It really does. And I think, like, this film, I think it's a bad film. And a film that I don't really like. But I think more than a bad film, it's a disappointing film. And I can only imagine what it must be like growing up with the original trilogy and then realizing they're making more and then realizing it's so disappointing, especially The Phantom Menace. I can only imagine what that feels like. But anyways, back to continuing of the review. And I think, like, and so, like, as far as the pod racing scene, I think it was interesting that there was the stakes going beyond the pod racing scene itself, that Watto and Qui-Gon had the bet going of if Anakin does not win, Watto will not fix the ship. But it's like, you kind of understand, most likely Anakin's gonna win. And honestly, this film is also a predictable film in that. In, like, the sense, like, with just seeing the original trilogy, could you predict Anakin's not gonna die? Yes. Can you predict that Qui-Gon is gonna die? Yes. You know how you can predict Qui-Gon's gonna die? Because why? Like, this whole time they've been talking about how Qui-Gon wants to train Anakin. And then you realize, well, we know he never ends up training Anakin, and he's also the mentor character of this film. So, you know, you wonder what's going to happen, and so, like, what you suspect does come true. Qui-Gon gets killed. Nonetheless, let's talk about midichlorians. I'm not a big fan of midichlorians at all. Just like a lot of things about this film. But, with that being said, I never really minded in the sense, like, I think the Force has always had a mystery element to it, that mystery element. And so, like, a bunch of people can have different point of views. And so, I think in many ways I can always just say, Qui-Gon might not be right about midichlorians. You know, what if it is? Because, like Yoda said about this idea that it binds us, that it's, the Force is kind of like a literal force, and this idea of midichlorians is kind of Qui-Gon's point of view, and Obi-Wan has a different point of view. So it's less of something that's fact. Oh yeah, you have midichlorians, and more or less it's like there's a like I think I always think of like the Force, which is real, but the idea of the definition of the Force to be a myth. The idea of the Forces exists, but kind of the construct and the idea and where the Force comes from to be kind of that mythical and mystery element that nobody really knows. So Qui-Gon is not lying, per se, but I think there could be a potential chance that he just doesn't know the full truth. And so I think I always keep that in the back of my mind, where it's like I always interpreted the Force to be an element where you can never fully, again, distinguish the Force. So yeah, that was that. So anyways, after that, they have a brief confrontation with Maul. It was very brief, but I didn't care because I knew that they're obviously setting it up for the greater confrontation at the end of the film, which makes up for any lack of Maul throughout the film. And so I think that also brings me, this is bad lighting, but also brings me to another fascinating thing about this film, is there's no real villains of this film. When you really think about it, it's not a film of a construct about villains. And you know why? Because a film solely about a character meeting another character is never about the story. It's never about the plot forced by the villain. It's always about the hero and whatnot. It's a hero story in a sense where it's like, well, not Tatooine. Is Watto the main villain? No. Is Watto even a villain? He's not really. He's an antagonist to our heroes, but not really a villain. So anyways, they get back to the ship. The ship's fixed. They go. They leave. And then you have some, like, Jar Jar scenes. There's Jar Jar scenes fluttered throughout this whole film. I don't know. I don't get Jar Jar. And it's like, George Lucas, like, had him in the film because he honestly thought, like, I think Jar Jar Binks was, by the nature of it, a very hit and miss character. In the sense that obviously it ended up missing, but it's like when you think about what Lucas was going for, what George Lucas was going for, his intention was never what Jar Jar ended up, being. And the idea that perception is everything. The concept of, I guess, what, like when you hear what George was kind of talking about, what he kind of hoped Jar Jar would end up being, he had never, again, like, realized he couldn't, I guess, put his plan into motion, I guess, like, on paper, in what the character of Jar Jar was never really translated well to the film itself. So yeah, let's move forward. So anyways, so yada. Anyways, they go to Coruscant, and so they're on Coruscant, right? And basically you meet Palpatine as a humble senator of Naboo. But yeah, I can't remember exactly where the scene is with Maul and Palpatine. But basically the scene where they're like, at last we will get our revenge. One of Maul's, I believe, 3 quotes in the entire film. So yeah, not a lot. Anyways, let's move forward on to the next part of the film. I think, like, there's not much to say about them on Coruscant until they get to the Jedi Temple. And once the Jedi Temple, Yoda, Mace Windu, do not have faith that Anakin is the chosen one, because they think he's too old to be a Jedi. And it's like, how old do kids, like, become a Jedi? Like, I guess it's like from childbirth. Like, if they seem Force sensitive, the Jedi will bring them in. But is 9 that old that you can't teach him? Because I mean, does that end up being the chosen one? I mean, he aced that, test that honestly I'd like to try, even though I'm not Force sensitive, but it seems pretty cool. I prefer puppet Yoda in Phantom Menace, or CGI Yoda in the Phantom Menace? I don't know. I probably would say CGI Yoda in the Phantom Menace, especially because everything else looks so CGI, and it's somewhat of a bad way, but somewhat in a good way, in the sense, like, it looks CGI, but that's kind of like the feel of the film, to a point where it's like having puppet Yoda is kind of like out of place. Like how, like, CGI in the original trilogy felt out of place, but non-CGI in this film kind of feels out of place. Or prosthetics and all that. In the sense where I think, plus, not that I don't like puppet Yoda, but let's be honest, the puppet of Yoda is not that good. Especially because, like, they had the challenge of making it look younger than Yoda and Empire, while still having Yoda look old. And so that was, I think, another challenge they did have to ultimately face. So anyways, they figure out Qui-Gon cannot be his Jedi or Padawan because of the rule of 2, and that you can only have one apprentice. And that's when I figured, obviously he's gonna die. Obviously, that, like, it became so apparent at any moment he's gonna die. Let's be honest here. But anyways, so they figure out, like, this whole plan, like, let's go back to Naboo. So they go back to Naboo, and they apparently want to join forces with the Gungan army. And I'm just like, okay. And again, I don't not like the Gungans. It's just I knew, since Jar Jar's definitely gonna join the fight, I was like, setting yourself up for disaster entirely. So anyways, continuing on with this review, the Gungans are like, yep, I'll join the fight. So, accordingly enough, the Gungans decide, let's go and fight. And so they do go and fight. So they're like, let's have this army. And at the same time, because the Trade Federation was kind of controlling the main center of Naboo, Mommy? Lucas, be quiet. Because of that, kind of, I'm gonna move my location again. But because of that, anyways, because of that. So anyways, Padme and her guards and army of Naboo go to reclaim Naboo. So anyways, they go back to the main city. At the same time, there's a war going on in space. And Anakin has this genius idea of going in the ship to hide. And it's like, yeah. And then he has this other genius idea to shoot, the droids and stuff. And so Anakin and Qui-Gon get stuck fighting Darth Maul in a legendary fight. By far, the best part about this film is the duel. I think, again, the space part, let's talk about every single part of this battle. The space part, I didn't care about at the very least, at all. Because it's like the space part, why I didn't care about the space part was because then it's Anakin. It's baby 9-year-old Anakin. I don't care about it. I don't. I like having R2 there, a familiar face. But Anakin, no. Now, when they had other soldiers fighting, that was cool. When you saw, like, those other... Like, the space battle is cool in concept, but then they focus it all solely on Anakin, pretty much. And that was like, I do not like that. I did not like that. Okay, so, moving on. The Gungan battle, same exact problem. I had no problem with the battle itself, but I had a problem that their main focus was on Jar Jar, who is really clumsy, who both Anakin and Jar Jar end up blowing the Trade Federation, and then ultimately Jar Jar beats the droids, all because of luck. And it's like, obviously it's like, oh, it's the Force. Probably it is the Force, but in the sense of, turns out the clumsiest, like, is the lesson supposed to be the clumsiest one always wins? Yeah, and like, it made it so apparent how clumsy and stupid Jar Jar was when compared to the other Gungans, when like all the other Gungans were like fierce warriors, were fighting tough. And then you have Jar Jar who's like just like throwing the different their weapons, which were cool and all, but again, like the idea of having Jar Jar throw it and all the stuff is like, well, that's not cool. And then the stuff with Padme and the guards, that was cool. That was honestly cool, seeing like the kind of, again, like the rebels of this film. You know, they had similar helmets and all that, and they honestly look like rebels, which I think, like, I feel like the people of Naboo kind of I feel like we're the kind of template of what the rebels should look like. Meaning, I do think there was a big chance that they honestly passed down their outfits that seemed good in battle for Naboo down to the rebellion, which was good in that sense. So yeah, you had that whole sequence, which was cool. And obviously they retook Naboo and got new Gunray captured, which was all fine. But again, like, you didn't care. That's the thing, is you didn't care about this part because the main focus was never on actually the fact that Naboo was held captive. You never cared because that's not the reason for this film. You're up for disaster when it comes to the plot, when you build the plot and the story around the characters. You will set yourself up for the disaster that ultimately you do see in this film. So anyways, moving on from that part, like I said, the lightsaber duel was fantastic. It was great. It was great. It really was. Duel Fate's amazing, and the location of kind of like those energy beams, and like there's like different levels. So like you would be like here with their acrobats, you would go there and do it like a double backflip onto this one, and then there's like the circle one, and like yeah, I think like the laser beam part of it, and like the choreography, and like Ray Park's legend at this stuff. Whether you talk about this film or even mocap for Clone Wars, legend, stuff of legends. Anyways, so yeah, that was exciting. And then like when they got to like the part with those red power walls. I don't even know what to call them. Those shoot, I probably know the word, but I can't say. But those red power walls, I'm gonna call them red power walls. When they got to like the red power walls, and like they would open, and then maybe you had to wait 5 minutes, close, wait 5 minutes, and like that was so intense when you knew that when Obi-Wan got stuck at the phases, and Qui-Gon and Maul had to fight, you knew that like we all knew Qui-Gon's gonna die in the scene, but that sense of realization that Obi-Wan could do nothing to help it, and then when you see Qui-Gon die, Obi-Wan screams no, which is a direct callback to Luke saying no when Obi-Wan died. But anyways, so yeah, that was crazy. And then obviously you knew it was heated up for Maul and Obi-Wan to fight at it. You knew it was like, that's personal. And then Obi-Wan gets stuck at the raft, or I don't even know what to call it. But anyways, he grabs onto, he falls down the pit, but grabs onto like a ledge, does his backflip, grabs Qui-Gon's lightsaber, cuts Maul in half. The Maul falls down the pit, but Maul survives using his anger and force. And honestly, I do think he learned a lesson or two from Sidious, who I think definitely learned some lessons from Plagueis, his master, about how to cheat death. So anyways, yada yada yada. Anakin becomes Obi-Wan's Padawan. Sidious smiles at Qui-Gon's funeral. Mace Windu and Yoda chat about the fact that there's the rule of two, and how do we destroy the master or do we destroy the apprentice? And then there's like the big ceremony on Naboo where Anakin has his Padawan. Padawan. Shoot, what would be the proper word? Padawan, braid. I didn't care. I didn't care for any of this. I did not care. All you could have literally said is Obi-Wan found Anakin on a mission to Naboo, and after Obi-Wan's master got killed, Anakin had to become his apprentice. That's literally all you had to do. Like, you didn't need a whole film surrounding that. So it didn't matter. It did not matter. It honestly made Attack of the Clones worse, knowing, like, he became so old and she aged not at all. So yeah, that's kind of my general thoughts of The Phantom Menace. I'll give it a solid 5 out of 10. Stay tuned for videos coming at you. And honestly, the 5 out of 10 is pretty generous.